fantastic start to your week. So I get that the camshaft thing is kind of a common question that I get on the channel, and so I figured I would bring it back, see if you got any questions about cams for the Hemi or just camshaft stuff in general. One of the things that I've found is, of all the questions that I get, one of the most frequently asked questions is, number one, how much are all these mods worth, talking about power? And number two, what and how much power can I pick up from a camshaft? And it usually just kind of ends there. It's like full stop. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit with this is that when you ask about a camshaft and when you ask about what a camshaft can do for you in terms of making power, one of the things that you have to remember is that asking about horsepower gains really isn't a good place to start. Let me explain to you why. Now, before I start getting into camshafts, lobe centers, intake center lines, lobe separation angle, all of that, before I get too deep into that, I do want to clarify one thing. And that one thing is that if you're talking about, or your question is basically hovering around a horsepower number, I'm just going to cut to the chase early on here. A decent camshaft for a 5.7 car or truck, you will be doing good with everything that you have to go along with that camshaft. We're talking intake manifold, larger throttle body, long tube headers, high flow exhaust system, and the works, along with the tune to go along with it. Realistic numbers. On a Mustang dyno, you're really looking at maybe 60 horsepower to the rear wheels. Honestly, you'll go from about 330 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno, an eddy current dyno, in other words. Mustang is just an easy shorthand for eddy current dyno. It's a brand name, kind of like Kleenex or rollerblades. Most of those 5.7s that I've seen put down about 325 to 330 horsepower on a Mustang dyno. Some of them will put down a little bit less, maybe 315, 320, but for the most part, I'm just going to use 320 just so that we can have some round numbers and it's easy to convert over to 6.4 numbers. So if you have a 5.7 and you do the full kit, you will end up being somewhere around 380, maybe 390 to the rear wheels. I have a couple of camshafts that have proven to cheat that number up a little bit, but that's also on a fairly generous dyno. So I don't want you to think that I'm coming into this and I'm trying to shoot your ideas down as far as putting cams in your car, or a camshaft in your car. It's just I want to shoot straight with you and give you an idea for what it's going to run like in terms of power numbers, because again, that's always where guys start, and you may find that that's not exactly where you want to begin your conversation. The real question is, what's working in terms of camshafts? What gives you the most significant driving experience gain? What gives you the theater? What gives you the performance? And what gives you an acceptable level of drivability that doesn't make you want to regret this decision? We're going to get into that. If you have a 392, nearly every 392 that I ever had on a dyno would put down somewhere in the pivot numbers, this number, right around 400 horsepower to the rear wheels on an eddy current dyno, on a Mustang dyno, specifically Pike's Performance. That 400 horsepower number could waver a little bit. Newer operating systems would put down maybe 410, older operating systems maybe 390. But the bottom line to this is that the 392, really no matter how you sliced it, would correct down to about 400 horsepower to the rear wheels. And I'm just going to use that number as a kickoff point. I want you to remember that 400 horsepower number. The 5.7 with all the goodies will get you to about 400 horsepower. The difference is that it will do it at a higher RPM. and it will be a much more exciting driving experience than the 392 is just from the factory. Tuning and all of that obviously taken out of this equation, because for the 392, the same principle applies. How much power are you going to get? Look, I'll be real honest with you. On any dyno, on the most generous dyno jet, everybody wants to quote a 500 horsepower number. And good luck with that, because most of them will not run that number. You will be doing really well on a Mustang dyno to pick up somewhere around 65 horsepower to the rear wheels. In other words, you'll go from 400 horsepower to maybe 465, maybe. And you might say, well, damn, that doesn't really sound like a lot. Considering the cost, it doesn't sound like a lot. But the reality is that horsepower per dollar, it kind of works out. I mean, you're still looking at about $100, or rather $10 per horsepower in this case. Or rather, I should say it's $100 per horsepower. You're picking up roughly 60 horsepower. It's going to cost you just south of $6,000. Depends on where you go in the cam core and all of that. But what I want to caution you on is you don't want all the sauce. So let's break it down like this. You have a 5.7. You're thinking about getting an off-the-shelf cam. What cam do you go with? Well, you can look at the HRT Stage 2, fairly popular cam. Comp 270, Comp 274. I get asked about those an awful lot. And in that case, I'm really not all that impressed with any one of those cams. You need to go with a custom grind specifically for the 5.7. And the reason for that is that the off-the-shelf cams for the 5.7 are either too small to really garner a significant difference, or they have too wide of a lobe separation angle, which is to say that they're going to feel kind of lazy through the mid-range. And by the time the thing starts making power, you're never going to notice that it's making power because it's just so lazy to start making power. That kind of cam profile is great if you have a positive displacement supercharger. It gives you instant boost response. But for an NA motor, it's not all that great, at least from the feel of it. And that would include your Comp 270, your Comp 274, and really HRT Stage 2 to a certain extent. Well, what about the 6.4? Well, the 6.4 is gonna want a little bit more of an aggressive cam, but it's still gonna need something with a fairly tight lobe separation angle to maintain and to keep torque down low. Tighter the lobe separation angle, the more power it's gonna make down low at the expense of drivability and a little bit of theater with the chippity chop chop. Some guys like that, some guys don't. For the long haul, everybody loves it in the short term, but it's the long term that gets annoying. Plus you get the car that starts to kind of try to jerk a little bit at stop signs, stoplights. You got to bump the idle up, then you're kind of hanging on the brake a little bit. There are concessions that you will have to make if you're deciding to go that route with your car. Either way you go. So where does that leave us? Oh, by the way, the older 5.7s, I mean, I don't really know why you'd bother, to be honest with you. But everything still applies. It's just the older 5.7s, you have to have the heads reworked before you do anything because of valve seats, known problem. And the 6.1, love me some 6.1. You know, just throw something in there that looks kind of like a 112 degree lobe separation angle, 220, 226, intake center line of about 107, and just have a ball with that thing. Make a lot of bottom end punch with that manifold. For the VDT cars, you're going to lock them out anyway. There's no sense in trying to get in there and play with, a few degrees. You're just never really going to get anywhere with that. I mean, I know that Alex has tried. We've had the car on the dyno. We've gotten sick and tired, honestly, of having a limiter in the car and playing with it back, playing with it forward, really not picking up any power, and having the thing on the dyno is basically getting a headache after a while. So most of the aftermarket custom grind cams, almost all of them actually, are going to be locked out. So, trying to retard the cam a little bit to pick up power on the big end isn't really going to help when you're relying on duration to get you the power on the big end. Tighter lobe separation angle means your intake runners are not going to be as active. So it's rocking that thing backwards is just going to, in essence, deactivate that runner even more. It's just not going to help, I guess, is really the better way to put it. So anyway, I'm going to stop there before I start really getting off into numbers, check in with you guys, see what's up. Let's see. Gary Fuller is in saying, what up, B? Got the arm flex. I like it. Mark saying, what's up? Perfect topic. I'm in the market for a cam for his RT. Very cool. Sovereign saying, what's up, B? Shannon saying, I got 528 with a full bolt-on 392 and a big cam, 3500 to 6900 power band. That would be on a dyno jet. Sovereign Knight saying 400 to the wheels is no joke, for sure. Sovereign Knight saying, I love the Scat Pack. Scat Packs are awesome. Sovereign saying Scat Pack be the car that I want. So I'm gonna say this. I've been able to play with my car a little bit, which is something that I haven't been able to do in a long time. And I know, woe is me, right? But the reality is that I forgot how much I really like driving that car. Lately, it's just been going to the drag strip, getting data, trying to get ready for this winter and this fall to really get out there and try to knock down a number if at all possible. I'm going to try to knock down a number with both seats in the car. It's going to run consistent teens. I know this. But anyway, long story short, I've been playing with my car a lot. And when I say play, it's just being playful with it, putting it in 500 horse mode. I freaking love that thing in 500 horse mode. It's super torquey down low. It's obviously far and away easier to launch, but if you had a chance to see a draggy video that I was able to post, Hellcats in 500 horse mode are so much fun, and it's really where the difference lies between a Hellcat and a Scat Pack. If you have a Hellcat, you have a Scat Pack. And that's what I wanted to show in that draggy video, was that, look, you don't have to have 700 horsepower to have fun. In fact, 700 horsepower sometimes isn't all that fun. 500 is a riot. So anyway, love me some Scat Packs. Plus, it brings back some really good memories for me. Speaking of which, we are near Velocito, and as you know, Velocito is near a very popular stretch of test tracks. So if you hear something, that's what it is. Catalyst, thank you very much. Saying for the Hellcat, is it worth a cam upgrade or switching to a red-eye blower more worthwhile? For the first question, no. For the second question, no. So let me kind of bring you into the fold with that. I want to see you spend your money on a cam. My rule with Hellcats is if you cam it, you pulley it at the same time. You don't get a choice with me. And the reason for that is when you put a cam together for one of these cars, you are in essence going to be building in some overlap. When you build in the overlap, you're going to be lowering boost. You're making the engine more efficient at higher RPM. And because of that, you're going to lose boost. So when you lose boost in a positive displacement supercharged car, what happens is that the thing will feel flippin' lazy. And when it feels lazy, you're going to feel like you wasted all this money on a camshaft. If, on the other hand, you put the cam in it and then pulley up the car, you get all the benefit of the cam on the big end, which you'll basically be at the same boost level that you were at before, typically. You go from like a stock pulley to a 3.0 pulley or something like that. Because you're going to lose a couple of pounds at least of boost. You'll go from 11 to 9, or 11 to 8 pounds of boost. Okay, full stop just for a second. Yes, you may pick up some power at a lower boost level, but the feel of the car is going to feel lazier. So I just don't recommend it for a positive displacement supercharged car. If you have a supercharged car of any kind where a cam will help significantly build power without a pulley change is really with a centrifugal style supercharger, because you can then keep that rising boost curve. With a cam, you can stretch your RPM, and the centrifugal supercharger is going to still try to send you even further to the right on that dyno sheet. So you're kind of playing into the centrifugal supercharger's hand. Whereas with the positive displacement, it's kind of the opposite of that. Yes, it may make some power, or it may make the same power. But if it makes the same power at less boost, it means you have less boost response. It means it's less snappy in most cases. So do you put the cam in the Hellcat? Yeah, if you want to have a Hellcat making 11 or 12 pounds of boost, but it's doing so with a cam, it's going to be making significantly more power. So you get all the power at that point of putting a smaller pulley on the car, but you have lower discharge temps. So again, you're kind of playing within the strengths of that compressor when you go pulleying that thing with a cam. If you put a cam in the car without pulleying it, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. From a driving perspective, from an actual, how does it feel to drive perspective? Now, switching to a red-eye blower, big mistake if you've got a Hellcat. One of the issues with the Hellcat supercharger is that they're great down low. And they're fantastic down low, actually. But you would almost be better off. I mean, if you want more boost, just pulley your stock supercharger. There are guys that are running mid-9s with the stock supercharger. You don't have to have the bigger supercharger. It's a waste of money. Plus, it's a bigger supercharger, makes more heat. More heat is not necessarily a good thing, and the littler blower seems to be more efficient. You can actually spool it up a little bit more and not pay a heat penalty the way that you do with the 2.7. So that would be my suggestion. So just, you don't have to spend the money. If you want more boost, just pulley the thing up. And by the way, that 940 number, that's with the stock cam in it. So we're talking street cars that when you drive them around, they idle perfectly. They idle at a stoplight as a stock car because they have a stock cam in it. It's only when you start really showering down on the thing do you find that you've got all this power. And honestly, I mean, look, there's guys that, the sky's the limit really with the stock blower, with how much power you want to make. You got to remember that second place for stock Hellcat world record was being set with a stock 2.4 liter supercharger in Nitrous. So, I mean, and that was at the time, it was an 853. And that's on a stroker combination, no less. So, just food for thought there. Ryan's saying he saw that I went with the BMR lower trailing arms by itself or, for rear suspension. Did you see changes and did it help eliminate wheel hop? So when I made the switch with Shalandra over to the BMRs, we also ended up running BMRs on the Demon. And did it help? I would say it helped a little bit. Not a ton, but a little bit. Chandelier does not have any suspension mods. She is straight up stock as it gets. And I don't really have the same issues that I had with Shalandra with Chandelier, primarily because the tires that I'm running are a little bit different. And at the time, the idea was to try to, the tire and wheel combination I was running really, I don't think was ideal, number one. And number two, these modern tires, you just have to run more pressure in them. If you watch that video that I did with the 500 horse mode, that 500 horse mode draggy video was run with tire pressures that were at 32 PSI. So literally at street pressure, and it performed really well because that contact patch was nice and flat, and you don't get any of the wheel hop that you get when you have a tire that's underinflated. You get cupping of the tire and you get uneven wear on the tire. You got to remember, you do not have a live axle. You have an independent rear suspension, and instead of that tire being flat, I'll just use this ruler, instead of the tire being flat, that tire's kicked up. So you have a lot more pressure right in here than you do out here. This is a bit of an exaggeration, obviously, but actually it sits about like that. And you can see it on the tire. This part of the tire will wear significantly quicker than this part of the tire out there does. So again, it's just something to consider when you're looking at wheel hop and looking at your suspension setup. Let's see. So we're saying 465 is a lot. It's a lot on a Mustang dyno, I'll tell you that right now. So we're saying almost in Hellcat Black territory. Yep. Gary saying he loves the scat. I like him too. Manual. Bob saying my 6.2 only gets 7.5 miles to the gallon after fill up. It says 150 miles still empty. Yeah, mine, if I don't reset it, is not that good. So we're saying you saw the draggy video at 500. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. You guys saying just keep it stock. That's one of the things, one of the reasons why. Oh, for you guys that are in the chat now, I did get my crank pinned today. And the reason why I got my crank pinned is because I am in essence leaving the car stock and I'm keeping my Hellcat. I've decided that there's just simply nothing out there that does anything for me. There's nothing out there that I want to make a switch to. There's nothing out there that I can afford. I mean, there's just nothing out there that I don't think anybody really would even care about that I'm interested in. And to be honest, I really don't feel like jumping in the middle of debt to pick up another car that is going to be worn out. In other words, the topic of that car is going to be worn out by the time I take delivery of mine. So in the interest of durability, longevity, and a really big question mark as to why these cars never did have pinned cranks from the factory, went ahead and got the crank pin today. So figured I would share that with you guys as well. But yeah, just keep it stock. That's what I'm planning on doing with mine. And, you know, when you're talking stock, I mean, I'm stocked down to the stock cats. So that is kind of my cars. And my favorite packages calling card is to still run catalytic converters. Keeps it quiet, makes it not stink. Chuck's saying, hey, what's up, Chuck? Ryan saying, custom cam from where? I have full bolt-on 5.7 2020 on E85. I'm 425, 476 on a dyno jet. I'm looking to get a cam without changing the torque converter, looking for the best bang for the buck. A couple of places you can call Dr. Differential Speed. That is in Groves, Texas, or Pike's Performance Tunes here in Houston, Texas. And you know, the thing is I know that the Joker cam, which is a cam I put together for Dr. Diff, really good camshaft. Apparently it gets a whole lot of love down there. So something to take a look at. But I will tell you that 4.25 and 476, I mean, that is on the absolute most generous Dyno Jet 276 I would have ever imagined that car to be on. So especially considering, I mean, you're on E85, which on a 10.5 to 1 engine is marginal. You know, I've seen numbers a lot lower than that. So don't be surprised on your baseline if that number does not come back looking like that. And that's another thing. Dyno numbers, this is one of the things that I wish I could do is when you set up a car on dyno, one of the things I wish you could do is set it up to where you baseline the car. And when you baseline the car, the number that comes back is 100. It doesn't matter how much power it makes. It could be a Hellcat. It could be a Mini Cooper. It could be a golf cart. It could be anything. You dyno the car and the number is 100. And you set that as your baseline number. And then you run the car again with whatever mods. And then whatever number comes up, that's your percentage gain. So you do mods and it goes 106. Okay, you picked up 6% in power. And you send them on their way. It would be cool if there was a way to do that, because dyno numbers are so inconsistent. And they are, I mean, we're talking from on the same dyno in some cases, depending on how the car is set up on the dyno. how the dyno is set up, the weather station on the dyno, the calibration of the dyno. This is on the same dyno, all right? We're not even talking about a dyno sitting right next to it, which can be completely different. It could be an inertia style. It could be another eddy current brand dyno. All these things are completely different. So that's why when I start getting into dyno numbers, the dyno numbers that I will give are the ones that I am familiar with. It is Mustang eddy current dyno run in wheel sensed mode. Any other dyno settings and any other dyno that you bring up is going to be a completely different number. And so I can only quote you Mustang dyno numbers. I can kind of quote dyno jet numbers because I do have experience with that, but even the dyno jet numbers, God, man, the dyno jet numbers are all over the board. So the list goes on. AB's asking, do you think camming a 5.7 will go a long way and bring you closer to the 6.4? Hey, Racer X, what's up, homie? Said he heard he's going to a twin turbo. He heard I'm going to a twin turbo Mustang. Well, should we tell him? Kidding. No, I'm not going to a twin turbo anything. Twin turbo Mustang. No. He was asking, do you think camming the 5.7 will go a long way and bring you closer to the 6.4? Get you real close, man. Look, it'll get you all but right on top of a 6.4, to be perfectly honest with you. If you do a full bolt-on non-E85 combination on a 5.7, if you follow the recipe, which is a dirty little recipe, but if you follow the recipe, you can put together a little bitch of a car for the street. And what that combination is give Dr. Diff a shout. Say, look, I want the Joker combination, which is Joker cam, PSI 1516 springs, stanky tie bars and collars, new Hellcat lifters, 080 or 120 push rods. That'll be long tube headers, pick your cat back, and then if you got an automatic, 373 gears. And get you a drag pack wheel and tire setup. You're going to need it. That car will put a hurting on practically anything that it rolls up on the street. It is really strong. I wouldn't begin to give you a quarter mile time on it. All I can tell you is on the street, the car is a flipping riot. That combination is. So word to the wise on that. Racer X, too funny. You're going to a turbo Mustang. No. So, at one point in time, and this is no kidding, I was about literally 5 steps away from buying a Mustang. And the reason why I was 5 steps away from buying a Mustang is I found the Mustang that I was going to get. It was a white with black wheels, Performance 1 package, I believe is what it was. Had black leather interior, and it had the analog gauges, which is the setup that I wanted. I didn't want the digital dash. And it had 355 gear, 373 with a 6-speed manual, and I wanted a 10-speed auto with a 355. Had that car been a 355 gear car, I probably would have bought it right there on the spot. But obviously it wasn't, and I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't, because I ended up with chandelier back here. So EPA saying, appreciate the knowledge. I encourage more donations. Time is money. Thank you, sir. No kidding. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate the kind words and the contribution. Thank you, brother. I think I passed up. Brian's asking, can a 6.4 be made bulletproof? Yeah, I mean, and then some. But I mean, how much money do you want to spend? The thing is, the 6.4 gets a bad rap, and it's a darn shame because what people don't realize, and this is too funny, the Hellcat engine, the Hellcat power plant was derived from the 6.4. Most folks don't understand that, but it was a 6.4 that was used initially for the mock-ups and the testing. So there's that. But no, the 6.4 can be. In fact, if you were to be gifted a 6.4 and somebody said you cannot put forged internals in this thing, you have to run it with the stock components, that would not be a bad deal. I mean, you pull the thing apart. If you're going to put boost on it, open up the ring gap to basically 26 thousandths on the top ring, 27 thousandths on the second ring, and put it back together. Nobody does that though. But that's really all you would have to do to make that engine really stout and be able to manage, quite a bit of boost without, too much of an issue with popping ringlands and stuff like that, which is what they do. You never see a rod. Hold up. You rarely see a rod go on a 6.4. It's typically a piston and it's typically a ringland because they come super tight from the factory. So, and that's great for an NA combination. It just sucks for, if you're trying to run boosted and you've got significantly now elevated cylinder temperatures. But can you? Absolutely. Molar rods or molar pistons, molar rods. Again, ring gap, 1 millimeter rings. So you got low tension rings also, but 1 millimeter rings gapped at, again, 25 and 26. You're going to be in pretty good shape. Keep the 6 thousandths per inch of bore and you're pretty good as far as setting your ring gap. But, you go a little bit tighter than that, maybe, go 25-ish if you're worried about blow by, but you're just not going to get that much with that setup. And that's it. The crank will handle any amount of power that you want to throw at it. It's a forged steel crank. It's not going anywhere. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you. Big Dave saying my 426 NA with a B cam is pretty much bulletproof. King Lord God B cam. Insert thunderclap sound here. Yes. B cam with his disciples of 1.7 roller rockers. BML saying Brampton closed still third week in a row. That sucks. My Charger Hellcat order stuck in G trim status, waiting 10 weeks now. Eesh, that's going to be forever. Heard some rumors that they were starting to have a little bit of movement on chips, but I don't know what the turnaround time really looks like. Chuck saying, hey, B, why is the 5.7 the same specs as the old 446 pack? Wasn't that a big block? Chuck, there's literally nothing that ties the 5.7 to the 440 aside from maybe firing order. But if you're asking, you may be asking about the horsepower. So basically 400 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque. The 440 was a big block, but a bunch of stuff you got to remember. Number one, the 440, even as a 6-pack, was overrated. 375 is what it was rated at, or 390 might have been what it was rated at. Either one, a single 4-barrel with 902 heads was rated at 375. It was really more like 350. It was about 25 horsepower, 50 horsepower overrated, depending on which dyno you want to believe and what trim you want to believe. We'll get into that because those engines were actually spec'd out on the dyno in different configurations. So, did it have the fan or did it not have the fan? Did it have the air cleaner or did it not have the air cleaner? Did it have the air cleaner and the fan or did it not have the air cleaner and the fan? What exhaust manifolds? Was it test headers? All that kind of comes into play. But yeah, it's just cylinder head technology. It's fueling technology. It's all of the modern technology that we have now is you can have a smaller engine make the same horsepower and torque as big blocks from back in the day. With one exception, it will not make that same power in the first 1,500 RPM to 2,000 RPM. It will not make the same power. That power is going to ramp up and in, and then it's going to ramp up and in, and then tabletop. Whereas the big block is going to start high and just kind of fall off. The other thing is that 440 makes all of its power before 4,500 RPM, basically. The six pack would have maybe revved out to $5,000. I've dynoed what's the last 440s? The last set of 440s. What the hell? Was there a six pack? There wasn't a six pack in there. It was all 4 barrels. Single 4 barrels. And that was really the modded cars. That's the direction they would go. And they, they're old big blocks. They make peak power no higher than 5,000 RPM usually. Fun fact though, the port velocity on a 440 at 4,750 RPM is the same as a Hemi is at 6,200 RPM. So that'll give you an idea as far as, port sizing and air charge and what the carburetor is seeing at those RPM. 440 is just drawn real hard on that carburetor. And because of that, it's going to lay over a lot sooner. It's the way that it is. So you got to take that into consideration too. These newer engines rev at least another 500 to 700 RPM higher. Way better cylinder heads on the Hemis today too. The 440, whether it's an RB with a 440 or the short block or the shorter deck height with the 383, the cylinder heads that are on those cars are like kind of good small block heads. They're really not big block heads, at least not in terms of flow and what you would consider a good flowing big block head. They ain't that, but that's not what they're designed to do. They're designed to be extremely responsive, which is why they are so freaking much fun to drive. And it's another reason why 440s consistently outsold the Hemi cars. It's not because the Hemi was so much more expensive. It really wasn't. For what you were getting anyway. I mean, there's a lot of guys that would spend the $800 to get the Hemi option. But it was the fact that the 440 just driving around felt like a big block, whereas the Hemi felt like a kind of a crappy disposition big block, where the 440 is like, yeah, the Hemi's like, okay. And then it would just, scream on the big end with the right tune-up. Ryan's asking, what are my thoughts on the 6.4 manual cam for the Charger RT? Is a good budget build with performance springs? Yes, it is. However, man, look, let me tell you what isn't budget. That's tearing the whole thing apart to put that cam in there. Believe me, you'd be better off getting the right cam in that 5.7 rather than the other stock cam. It's still going to have a real wide lobe separation angle. I just don't think you'd be as happy with it. You're not going to have the bottom end hit that you're going to have with a custom grind cam. And I mean, you're spending all this money. Why would you try to skimp on the cam core? Everything else that you're buying should still be upgraded. You need to upgrade the springs. You need to upgrade the push rods. You're already there. You need to do that. You're presumably, even though it's manual, you probably would be buying new lifters. So, the idea, I get it. It's while you're there. You want to try to do it on a budget. But man, if I'm putting that much work into something, I ain't leaving stock stuff in that car. Ain't no way. US EPA saying my 2018 Scat 426 in a cam and converter car has been a nightmare. Oil fouled my O2s and plugs, leak down test and compression test that was good. The shop said my oil catch can is too small. Any thoughts? Well, I don't really even know where to begin with that, bro. One of the issues you may have, if you've got oil, if you got a lot of blow by, it could be that so if it's a fresh build and you have a lot of blow by, what it can be is you may have one cylinder where the rings themselves, the ring gaps are more or less sitting right on top of each other. I highly doubt that's the case though. Oil fouled O2s and plugs is going to insinuate to me Oil found on the plugs would be bad valve seals would be my guess. You're getting oil into a significant amount of oil into the exhaust if you're fouling O2s like that. I mean, you will be hemorrhaging oil. I mean, it's going to look like it's been stabbed to be throwing that much oil downstream. As a matter of fact, it would be smoking significantly. Leak down and compression being good would tell me that the ring gaps are not lining up, that they're offset the way that they should be. So the only other things that could be would be valve seal potentially, some other gasket that's clipped or something like that, allowing oil into the intake manifold. But you would see it would be smoking like crazy. That's why I have a tendency to believe it's something after the fact. And if it's oil soaked, man, I don't know, that's the first I have ever heard of something like that. The catch can being too small, I don't run catch cans on the Hellcat, and I can assure you that if you're in a situation where your catch can is too small, you're really more like you're in a situation where, wait a minute, are you emptying your catch cans? How much oil is in your catch can? The thing is that you've got to empty those things regularly. You need to check them every time you put gas in the car, or at least once every couple of weeks at least, especially with a stroker build. Also, how much oil are you running in that thing? And did you put a modified windage tray into that car? What could also be, there's so many things that could be going on here. So if you have a stroker combination and you, for whatever reason, they didn't put a windage tray in there, you're going to have a lot of windage, which is to say you're going to have a lot of aerosoled oil in your crankcase, which through your PCV system means you're going to be dragging a lot of oil through your PCV system into your intake through your catch can. So there's that. I would also say that, man, there's a lot to unpack here. Now I'm starting to wonder, it may not even be a valve seal. But if you oil soak the O2s, I don't even know how the hell you can manage that. Like, you got to be trying to do that. There's a lot more than just one thing going on there, but check your catch cans. It wouldn't be the first time. Look, I've had cars show up to the shop with full ass catch cans, and it's literally sucking the oil out of the catch can into the intake manifold. You talk about making a situation 10 times worse than what it could have been. Catch can, yeah, it's catch can. It catches stuff, but they never drain it. And now it's got this big reservoir that it's just the intake under vacuum is sucking everything out of it. So it's a bad situation. So I was checking in with Racer X. Installing Windows 11 on the TV PC. Modern Red saying Pro Charge 5.7 with a Comp 270. Should I get a custom grind? If so, recommendations. Man, no. No, you've already got that cam in your car, and you've got a supercharger. That cam with a supercharger, along with the 274 for large displacement engines with a supercharger, ain't half bad. I just don't like it naturally aspirated for those cars because it will feel a little bit, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's just going to feel a little bit soft. Lazy is the better way to put it, I should say. So I would say leave the cam in there. Don't put anything else in there. The only thing that you would pick up is some bottom end power, and that's about it. I don't think that you would really, to be honest with you, notice it all that much. And the trick to it is, if you want more power, just turn up the boost. That's the fun part about having boost, is if you do want more power, you just turn the power up. Turn the boost up. Chuck's checking in with Dunn. Modern Red got the arm flex. I like it. Oh, Modern Red's asking for ARP head studs. Do not know on that one. XA Professor B dropping some knowledge. I like it. Thank you. George's asking, which one of my cams would I suggest for a turbo setup on a 392 Hemi? Depends on what you want to do with that 392 Hemi. What is your build? What is your end goal with it? Is it a driver? Are you going to be running this thing on E85? Are you going to be running it on pump gas? Are you planning on doing roll racing with it? Staying in it for long periods of time? Are you going to try to do like a 100 to 200 mile an hour hit? Or are you going to be mainly cruising it and just using it for burnouts for distance? There's a different cam for every one of those scenarios. All that being said, I'd probably go with, and it's going to depend, just for in general, like a good pivot cam to go with would be the Warlock grind. A little bit more aggressive than the Joker, and is still a good streetable cam all the way around. So I would probably start off with that one. It's got a little bit of a tighter LSA. It sounds good, and puts down pretty decent power with a 392. And that would give you at least some overhead on the big end if you wanted to run the thing out. If you decided that and also it would work well with the 85 if you turned up the boost, to respectable limit, I guess, like 14, 16 psi and up. It'd be good for E85. But if you want something that's really more of a like a street grind or something like that, I'd probably just put something like the Warlock together, make it a little bit smaller and advance it a little bit. That way you can use the boost to kind of drag the power out further than, say, 6,000 RPM, have something that'll pull to 63, 66, and it'll just be a more fun setup. So it just depends on what you want to do with the car. It is a very personalized thing, and keep your goals realistic and be real with yourself when you're setting these goals. Like, look, I want this thing to be able to go 200 every time I drive it. No problem. It's just boosting cam and fuel and some road away from that. If you're like, nah, it sounds a little bit insane. It is. I used to do it, and it was insane because I am a complete lunatic. At least I was. Still have flickers of my stupidity sometimes knew no bounds. So if you want something again that's going to be more fun, at more sane speeds, there's other ways to go about it. Depends on the turbo that you're running. Again, there's so many different things that it's going to depend on. How do you want a setup that's going to respond really quickly, or do you like the lag, and do you know that lag, it's the calm before the storm, and shit going down now, and that's what I like anyway. So again, it just be honest with yourself about your goals and be honest with what you are looking to achieve with that cam. Cal's is asking, which torque wrench do I like better, click or digital? I prefer the click. That's what I'm used to. And the digital, the beep, I don't always have access to the beep, I guess. So I would probably like the beep if I had the beep, but I like having something that I don't have to worry about batteries also. I just want something that goes click and I'm good to go. Teddy's saying, hey Mason, manual 6.1 here. What cam do you think? So for the manual cars, I'd go a little bit more aggressive. For you, I'd recommend something intake center line of about 109 or even 110. Lobe separation angle probably somewhere in the 112 range. Duration on the intake side somewhere in like the 222. Exhaust side probably 226. And intake center line, yeah, I'd say still intake center line 109, 110. tell you what, intake line 109, don't go to 110 with that. But keep the tighter LSA, and it would be a nice choppy sounding thing. Lift doesn't really matter. 590, 585, and 590. But that'd be a fun cam. Chuck said, I think my Hemi is more efficient, though, or any modern engine compared to the old V8. Oh, far and away. It's not even close. It is not even close. Like, you can't compare the older engines with the engines that are available today. It just absolutely can't be compared. Chuck saying, coil packs replace the Dizzy. Well, no. Coil packs just replace the coil per cylinder. The exciter ring and the Hall effect sensor replace the distributor. And then the curb is all handled through the ECU. EPA saying, yes, it's emptied every week. Has a modified windage tray. They're saying it's sucking oil out of my catch can. Okay, so if it's sucking oil out of the catch can, that would mean that there has to be oil in the catch can from which to suck. So you don't suck oil out of a catch can, you suck vapor through the system. And the vapor itself will carry the oil and moisture particulates, if you will, droplets, better way to put it, through that system. So if the oil is going into the catch can and then going into the engine, that would mean your catch can would have to be about that tall, and I doubt that's the case. You've probably got, I don't have one sitting over here, a normal size catch can. So yeah, but if you're draining your catch can and you're getting a significant amount of oil out of it, and that oil will be a combination of oil and condensation and the like, then that is really more the cause of concern than the fact that the car is sucking oil, that much oil out of it. Put you like this, I mean, the world record breaking Hellcats will run 2 oil catch cans run as a daisy chain. And that's because there is so much cylinder pressure when you're making, 1,1600 horsepower, that you would fill one up, or you could potentially fill them up. Actually, they're not in daisy chain, they're wide off. They're on both sides, both intake side and discharge side on that PCV circuit, if you will. But yeah, that's something that that's the next question that I would have to ask. Modern Red saying, thanks for dropping the knowledge. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, brother. Happy to. Oh, he's saying it never gets full. Well, yeah, I mean, if it never gets full, then how could it be sucking the oil out of there? Really, you shouldn't be getting more, honestly, than this Powerade cap full of oil every week or so. I mean, when it drains out, it looks like a shitload. It really does. I get it, but it shouldn't be all that much. About the only thing you can do, and KS, mention this, is take your manifold off, take that intake off, and see if there is one of the O-ring gaskets. See if it's cut. Make sure it's there. Be surprised. But make sure the gasket's there. You may just need to get a gasket kit and re-gasket that manifold. It's super easy to take on and off. Just do not over tighten it. Just put a little wrist on it. Don't you get it snug and then just go, and that's perfect. You're good. Just seat the rubber gasket down. That's it. Don't go. I take it from this guy. And stick with your torque sequences. Outside to in taking off, inside to putting it on. Take a look at that. And when you take the intake manifold off, inspect the intake and see if it's just absolutely shellacked with oil. You're going to notice oil pooling on your intake valves themselves. Just know that that's fairly common with these cars. It doesn't matter. First and foremost, if you've got catch cans, great. But when I port manifolds, there's cars with catch cans, intake manifold's covered in oil. And I don't understand. I've got a catch can. It's like, yeah, you do, but that, how do you say, the steel wool that's in there, that is a nucleation site for the vapor, the oil droplets, the water droplets, which is the condensation, everything else that is being drawn through that catch can. The catch is in that steel mesh, that steel wool basically. And the droplets hit that, they come out of suspension, and then they drop into the can. Well, a couple of things. Number one, if you only have like a little bitty bit of material there, then you're going to have a little bitty bit of nucleation site. So you're just going to basically get it go through. I've said it before. I mean, I don't have any data to prove this, but I've seen so many of these intakes. I've worked on so many of them that for me, it looks like if you've got a catch can, it's picking up 25% of what's being actually drawn into the intake manifold and then into the intake runners and then, through the system itself. I don't believe, I know you get into the belief thing, but I don't believe that there's really a lot going on with the catch can. They help. I will say that in some cases they help. They can help to identify if you've got a problem. If you find out that you got this catch can filling up really quick, something's kind of weird. But I don't run one on the Hellcat. The reason why I don't run one on the Hellcat is because it just doesn't need one. But keep an eye on that. If you've got some free time, pull the intake manifold off. See if you've got a cut gasket somewhere. Also, look, when you pull the manifold off, I would say, look to see if there's any one cylinder or one valve that looks like it's getting hit with more oil. But the problem with that is that you get into a distribution thing where the inside of the plenum of that intake manifold is pretty turbulent. You've got, cylinders dragging air from it and all of that. So it just could be the way that the vapor is being drug into one particular runner. So if you do take it off and you see that, I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you do take it off and you see that, don't go, huzzah, that's the cylinder that's messed up or what have you. It may not be the case at all. So I typically, when I pull the intake manifold off of the 6.4s, for sure the front two, number one and number number one and number two are actually, there we go. Number one and number two are actually the ones that have oil around the valve more so than the rest of the cylinders. But that doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that that's how the oil was sitting on the valve. So just something, and that's kind of anecdotal anyway. It's just something that I noticed. I never really paid it any mind because I kind of know what's going on inside that manifold anyway. So yeah, KS is saying, take your intake manifold and see if it's sucking oil. It'll be obvious. And it will be obvious if there's a cut gasket. He is right about that. Mono Red saying, thanks for dropping the knowledge again. Thank you, my friend. Callis is asking, if I had a Mustang, would you go twin turbo or Whipple? I'd go Whipple with the Mustang. And the reason why I would go Whipple with the Mustang is because Racer X went turbo with his. Actually, if I had a Mustang, I'd probably go Pro Charger with it. And the reason why I would probably go Pro Charger with it is because it's a little bit easier on the transmission. And when Pro Chargers come on, they don't, turbos can have a weird, it's something that you get used to, but when they come on, they can come on like really hard. Pro Charger kind of does that, but nowhere near like the turbos, and they're very easy to modulate. They'll make the same, you can make the same horsepower with a Pro Charger that you can, and Pro Charger meaning centrifugal supercharger, then you can, you make enough power to blow the thing up with any of the superchargers. And I say that supercharger, I don't know, Whipple would be tough for me to bet against also, because you get that instant torque. The problem with all of that is that instant torque and torque that ramps in really hard from a turbo is hard on the transmission. And if you don't have a built transmission, it can shorten the life significantly to run a positive displacement supercharger on a car like that. So unlimited funds, build the extra clutches, put a Whipple on it with a 200 shot sitting just in case I need it. So we're saying smash that like button. And, and I say that though, I'd probably go centrifugal now that I'm thinking about it, just because the Mustang does so well. You want to play to a car's strengths, and the Mustang, its wheelhouse is high RPM. And if you put a Senti or a turbo on that thing, it's going to allow it to really have a hard drive on the big end. So turbos are a cheat code. And if you can get away with a turbo kit, you probably want to go with a turbo kit, especially if you're doing any kind of roll racing with it. The centrifugal supercharger is going to be easier to control. It would be good at drag racing and roll racing, or closed circuit racing, because it's so easy to modulate. And the way that centrifugal superchargers work, this is centrifugal supercharger how-to 101. And we're supposed to be talking about cams, but Senti 101 is you pick an RPM that you are going to rev the car to. And you pick a supercharger that is going to give you peak power at that particular RPM. So a lot of guys end up having to go smaller on the supercharger, just like you would on a turbo, to limit that RPM overhead. And when you do that, you pick up boost response down low, just like you do with a turbo. But the idea, in other words, you're spinning a smaller supercharger faster, which means that in many cases you pick up power down low where you wouldn't have had it with a bigger supercharger that you're spinning slower. But the idea is that you pick the power level that you want, you bully it to the power level that you want, and then you send that out into the world, because you can actually modulate power coming out of corners much easier with a centrifugal. And you can flat foot a centrifugal supercharger, meaning you can use more available torque and, more importantly, more available horsepower in a non-throttle situation. In other words, you can go wide open sooner coming out of corners as you're coming up to apexes, rolling into the throttle. Before that, you don't have a chassis upsetting whoosh of power that you would out of a turbo, and you don't have the instant torque that's going to you can't flat foot the roots blower, because you're just going to get hit with all this torque, and that's going to piss off the chassis also. It's just going to make it unbalanced. So the centrifugal supercharger makes life really nice. Plus, it's lightweight, fairly easy to package, and it doesn't really matter in terms of altitude. You just kind of pulley the car for whatever altitude you're at, and you're good. Turbos are the cheat code. Turbos don't care about altitude. Turbos don't care about density altitude at all, as a matter of fact. Turbo will, as long as it has atmosphere to pull air from, it will suck in air and make manifold pressure, regardless of what you have to do pulley-wise to get it to make the power. So that's where the turbo has the advantage, is that it will make a power wherever you're at, provided you have enough turbo to make the power. The centrifugal supercharger will do that also, but it's going to have a higher parasitic loss associated with it. So I don't know. I like the more predictable and more linear power that the centrifugal puts together. It just doesn't upset the chassis as much. And even when you're roll racing, the turbos are great because when they come on, it's on. But on the street, they can be. On the street, turbos can be real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And that sounds kind of cool, but it's only cool when you're dealing with Dr. Jekyll, because when Mr. Hyde shows up to the party, shit starts breaking. So, and usually it's your control of your bladder is what's breaking, because when those things come on, they come on really hard. To put you in perspective, if you flat foot a turbo car, like just downshift, let it do its thing, it is just like hitting a 200 shot of nitrous like that. They just come on. When they come on, it's wham, and they hit real hard. It's exciting, but it also upsets suspension geometry. So you have to really make sure that you've got a tire that can handle that. USCPA saying, thanks B, any recommendations on a good Mopar shop? I am willing to ship my car if that helps. Sounds like I need a new shop if I don't figure it out myself. Dr. Diff is a good one in Groves, Texas. Again, Pikes Performance here in Houston. Either one would take good care of you. Main thing is to figure out what is the deal. KS, I don't have a whole lot of dealings. I haven't messed with Forces, so I really don't know. I've heard they're good, but I've never had a chance to visit with anybody there. George is asking, what force induction do I prefer? Giggle gas, snails, or some kind of a belt-driven supercharger? It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. It all depends on the application. So for a street car, for something that is going to be my personal fun car that I'm going to enjoy to drive, nothing beats a positive displacement supercharger. There is a reason why AMG, the Hellcat variants, why there are so many, at least, the GT500, the Lightnings before that, the Termies, and all these other cars. The reason why people gravitate towards the positive displacement superchargers is that they are so satisfying to drive. Think of it like this: positive displacement supercharger, like the GT500, pick one, they're all the same. Like the GT500 has, or like the Hellcat has. It's like your favorite burger joint, all right? It is just such a satisfying, good feeling thing to have. Instant torque, instant response. That is what you're buying with a positive displacement supercharger. And I love the driving experience. Now, ZL1, ZR1, that's why all those cars have positive displacement superchargers. They're easy to package. They're just better in a lot of ways, man. And it's not always about the number that they make. Then you get into, so let's talk about, so that's the positive displacement supercharger. If it's my personal favorite, I'm probably going to be looking at positive displacement supercharger for the car that I would want to basically hang out with and snuggle up against. For a car that I'm looking to make straight up outright power, it's turbos all the way. There is no arguing the point. Turbos are just significantly more efficient at making power. And people will argue, yeah, but the packaging and this and all this other stuff. Look, there's people for that, okay? If I want to haul ass, and I mean serious haul ass, I'm going to go with turbos. They're just too easy to make go fast, and they go fast regardless of the environment that you're in, within reason. They're still affected by density altitude, just not nearly to the extent of anything that's belt driven. Because if it's belt driven, it is like you are taking a breath. Okay? If it's belt driven. If it's exhaust driven, it's going to be always spinning. The engine doesn't have to do anything to make it spin other than just be an engine. And the losses that are associated with, let's say it's 15% in terms of a horsepower loss, as opposed to, say, 20% with a positive displacement, or 18% or 17%, whatever the number is for a centrifugal, depending on the combination, et cetera, et cetera. So what about the centrifugal supercharger? The centrifugal supercharger, for me, falls in line with, it depends on the combination, but I like the centrifugal supercharger if I am putting something together that I want to race, like an actual race, something that's going to be on a circuit, something that's going to be on some type of a closed circuit or some type of just a race circuit, I'm going to go centrifugal supercharger with that. And the reason for that is because I can say, okay, I want to know that at 7,800 RPM, I'm going to be making 650 horsepower. So I'm going to put this head unit in that car. I'm going to make X amount of boost with this fuel, and I'm going to make 650, 850, whatever the number is. Call it 800 horsepower to the wheels with that combination. And leading up to that, I've got a very linear underfoot feel for the power that's going to come out of that thing. It's going to be gangbusters on the big end, and it's going to be somewhat softer down low. That's where a centrifugal supercharger really shines. And so if I'm doing, for example, if I'm building something that I want to run like 60 to 130 in, say, high 4s, low 5-second range, it's going to be a centrifugal supercharger, because I can feed power in with a centrifugal supercharger without worrying about that huge torque hit that I'm going to get with a set of turbos. And I also don't have to worry about the fact that, well, if I've got a positive displacement supercharger, I'm kind of outside of its wheelhouse at that point. Positive displacement supercharger is to get you moving very quickly. A centrifugal supercharger is when you're going fast. If you want to go really fast, that's when the centrifugal supercharger works. Turbos are just like, whatever you want to do, we'll just keep making boost. And that's what turbos do best. Again, it's the ultimate cheat code. But again, it comes with some driving dynamics that can be a little bit unsavory and for some folks in certain situations. Chuck's in saying, thanks for asking my question, Pete. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, US EPA saying centrifugal all day, kind of best of both worlds almost. Well, here's the thing about a centrifugal supercharger. Look, people think, centrifugal supercharger, it's only for top end horsepower. It's absolutely not true. You can pulley a centrifugal supercharger to make max boost at whatever RPM you want to. This is one of the misconceptions about centrifugal superchargers, and I never understood why folks would get it confused. I mean, I can kind of understand why, but let's say you have an engine, and it's, like the 400 small block that's in Sierra. 400 small block in Sierra, it's pretty much signing off at about 4,700 RPM. So let's say I have a centrifugal supercharger. If I bolt it onto the truck, depending on the pulley ratio, it might make 5 pounds of boost. Well, but if I were to spin the engine, it could make 8 or 10 pounds of boost at a much higher RPM. It's just never going to see that RPM. So what do? You pulley the supercharger to make the boost at whatever RPM you want to make that boost at. And if the goal is to make, again, let's say 800 horsepower, and in this type of configuration, your engine, this mythical engine that we're talking about, only spins to 5,000 RPM, you simply pulley the supercharger at whatever DA you're going to be running in. You just pulley the supercharger to whatever the RPM is that you want to have as your shift point. Super easy. Do some testing and see how much overrun you've got. Overrun just means that once you've made peak horsepower, what does the power do? Does it just tail off and nosedive, or does it carry over? Does it kind of slowly trail off? Just get a good judgment for what your overrun is. But I mean, that's how you make centrifugal superchargers work. That's why they're so good at what they do. You can literally, it's dial in a power number and then it'll just get there when it gets there based on RPM, which makes life kind of nice. Let's see. Monterey saying, what Professor B and EPA said, 100%. Yeah, they're fun, man. Like I say, you just gotta know what you're looking for. Doctor was saying, B Mason, my man, glad I got on the live tonight. Had 16 teeth pulled, so down and out for a good reason. Damn, dude. Checking in with Dr. Dev saying painkillers. Absolutely. Almost wishing I never did it. Yeah, I bet. Sovereign saying, hey, Dr. Diff. Sovereign's checking in saying just chilling. Sovereign saying, hope you're doing great. James saying 345 with a Paxton supercharger. Very fun combination, by the way. Oh, Sovereign's saying Demonology is taking the gloves off with that drag pack Whipple. I can only imagine the results. It's going to run good. Check that. It is running good. Dr. Duke saying, love me some turbos. Boost the world in turbo form and keep my gas mileage too. Well, kind of. Yeah. Oh, yeah. With the turbos, you can get a good torque plateau also if it's sized properly. Come on whenever you feel like and when you want it to, although there is a loss there. But light it off when you need to and want to. And then he's liking what I said about the Senti too. Yeah, so the thing, there's a reason why manufacturers use turbos. First of all, this is how efficient turbos are. Turbos are exclusively used in shipping, where economy and efficiency is king. You have to run turbos, or you face having a less efficient power plant in general. If you want a locomotive and it's a diesel-powered locomotive, it will have one or two positive displacement superchargers that feed and draw air on a two-stroke diesel, and that is getting fed by turbos. Every Kenworth, Peterbilt, and Mack truck, they're all running turbos. And the reason, again, is because they are significantly more efficient at making power, especially as a steady state. But in making power in general, they're just so much more efficient that, it shows up on the bottom line. Cal's asking, what are the best jack stands to buy? Man, I don't know. I've got a set of old Sears jack stands floating around here somewhere that are probably older than I am. So I really don't know any of the maybe not Harbor Freight. Matco, Craftsman. Dr. Diff saying it makes life nice. Good point. That goes with any power adder for sure. George is asking, is a Hellcat going all-wheel drive? His buddy told him that it is. It's not, at least not in the guise that it's in now. You may see something coming soon in the Stellantis STLA large platform, but no, in the way that it's set up now, I don't think that it's going to be going all-wheel drive at all. Doctor saying those are definitely older than you are. I think they are. In fact, I'm almost positive those old hand-me-downs are at least as old as I am, which is to say they're old. One of the questions, like, what are my thoughts on Nitrous? Just because it was one of the power hours I mentioned, I didn't really get into. Nitrous is great. One of the things that people understand, though, is that Nitrous is not the cheap and easy way to power. You'll be told that over and over again. It's absolute malarkey. It's not the cheap and easy way to make power. If you're putting a Nitrous system together, it is neither cheap nor easy, and you don't want cheap and easy when it comes to introducing a very potent oxidizer into your engine. That's what an oxyacetylene torch is, basically. So yeah, you can just pump nitrous into the thing. You can just bottle into the throttle body and yeah, there's your nitrous hit. But to do it right, it's not. Here's one of the thing. I love nitrous, by the way. You're talking to a guy that had an old a Sneaky Pete system that I put that on my lawnmower People think I'm bullshitting about that. I literally put nitrous on my lawnmower because over my old house, I had a septic system and it would grow like crazy around the septic system. So you get near the septic system and spray it. It worked. It worked pretty good. But here's the thing, though, and the reality about nitrous is that what people fail to realize is that there is maintenance involved in a nitrous system. I say, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is you have a fuel system, if it's a wet kit, that sits dormant unless you're spraying it. If you're running an ethanol blended fuel, that ethanol blended fuel sitting stagnant in the tank can, depending on the pump, affect the pump. It can affect the lines. It can corrode aluminum parts. You got to be real careful with these things. But the big part about nitrous that you've got to remember is that the solenoids make everything happen. And you have to replace your solenoids once a year. I have had the only times of the 3 or 4 spooky moments on a dyno where I thought I may have just popped one is it's happened with nitrous kits. And it's happened because I was dealing with older solenoids, didn't realize it, had even asked one of the owners, how old are the solenoids? Like, they're about 9 months old. Okay. And that car, the nitrous didn't fire, but the fuel did. And so I'm on the throttle. I go to hit the throttle, and I hit the throttle, and I'm looking at the data log, and I look over at air fuel, and it's like at 9.0, and I'm like, oh shit! You get out of it. Being overly rich can be every bit as bad as having no fuel at all and having only nitrous. But I've seen it go all over the place. I've seen nitrous solenoid fire, fuel doesn't fire. Fuel fire, nitrous doesn't fire. I've seen solenoids stick open. I don't know how the hell some of these things happen, but they happen. And there are very sophisticated nitrous setups that you can get that work extremely well. But I would challenge you, if you're thinking about running nitrous, don't just throw nitrous at a situation and think that everything's going to be cool. You've got to be mindful of what you're doing. And really, nitrous is super easy. It's a lot of fun. The downside to nitrous, aside from what I just got through talking about, is that the bottles do run out of nitrous. So you've got to have a steady supply of that stuff, and it is addictive. You can run through it pretty quickly. So again, if you're planning on going nitrous, just know that you do have to swap out solenoids, keep everything dry. Don't forget to purge down the kit when you're done with it. How many times that's happened. Let's see, what else? Another thing, a lot of guys think that nitrous is going to be set it and forget it. Yes, you do have to go a range colder with the plugs with nitrous. If you're used to running 6s with the Mopar, you're going to need to run 7s. And I think that kind of wraps up my thoughts on nitrous. Like I say, I love it. It's great stuff. I only would caution anybody out there thinking about going nitrous that it's not as cheap, it's not as simple, not as easy as you might think, and you really will have to stay pretty vigilant with your maintenance. Oh, Doc's saying he's got an old toolbox from his granddad back in '92 and still use it. Love it. Yeah, my stuff, my tool boxes anyway are pretty old. Dr. Diff's asking, I got a weird question, 50/50 or pure M1 F1 94 Pro Charger vet with E on 100cc injector, 12 PSI, Good fuel system, stock bottom end. Jesse caught his on fire with a nitrous solenoid that didn't fire. Boom. Damn. If you're talking about the methanol, either going straight methanol or 50-50 water meth, I'd go 50-50 on that. He said, fuck those bottle openers too. So here's the, I've had this happen with the Viper where they still have the automatic bottle openers, and you could, the idea is that you, when you're done with the kit, especially when you're parking the car, close the bottle, purge the system down. That way you don't have nitrous just in the lines. You have, 16, 18 feet worth of nitrous lines with nitrous still, pressurized in them. You don't need that. You just just purge the thing down and you're good. But what can happen is, it can happen both ways. And what this is kind of funny, really. You go to close the bottle and it doesn't close all the way, or you go to open the bottle and it doesn't open all the way. So you got this bottle with 1,000 psi or 1,100 psi, but the valve isn't open all the way, so you don't get full flow of nitrous out of the thing. Yeah, the automatic bottle openers are bullshit. Just reach back there and turn the knob. Anyway, it's my own thoughts. And use good stuff. Yeah, that was part 2. No, I think I figured, with the meth question, I'd probably go 50-50, only because methanol is kind of corrosive. And, if you're using it sparingly, then you just use your distilled water and meth mix and just call it good. I don't like using methanol as an octane, like a specific octane delivery system, for lack of a better way of putting it. I would prefer that it's only used to cool off the air charge, and even then I'd prefer that it's direct port and not relying on distribution. It's a liquid, and at no point was any of these parts designed to flow liquid. So direct port is actually the way that the MW system that the Germans had put together for the 109s, that methanol water injection system was 50-50, and it was all meant to be direct port. In fact, it was all direct port. They never did anything introduced into the manifold or anything like that, because there's no way to meter it. There's no way to work out the fact that distribution is going to be different for cylinder 5 than it is for cylinder 3, and how that goes. Fred's saying, "What's cooking, me? What's up, man?" Let's see. Paul's asking, what do you think of the high horse performance Hellcat street strip camshaft? Like, anything Josh puts together is not going to suck. Just stick with the formula of, if you put a cam in a Hellcat, pulley it up. I can only tell you from my own personal experience that, you can pick up power with a cam without boosting the car. You pick up power and you lose a little bit of boost pressure. It's kind of a win-win, but you do lose boost response. In essence, you lose that torque response, that underfoot response that you're used to with the stock cam. Wide lobe separation angle means that there's not a lot of overlap, means your intake runners are very active, means you got real quick boost response, real snappy. Not the best thing in the world for efficiency down low, but what it does do is it carries power really well out back. So the way that you combat that is, if you have an aftermarket cam, you just have a cam that is set up for positive displacement, which is to rock it back a little bit and open up the lobe separation angle and throw some duration at it. And then throw some pulley at it, and then at the same boost level, you'll have a significant gain in power. Chuck's checking out. Good to see you, buddy. Saying his Pedal Commander is fun on Sport +4 on his shaker. I bet it is. I thought that thing's a riot. And with Chuck Balin, I've got to check out too because I got to wake up crazy early. Coming up on an hour and a half. Thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out. If I didn't get to you or didn't get to questions, hit me up on the next one. We'll try to do another one on Saturday. But with that, I want to thank each and every one of you guys. Love each and every one of y'all. Could not, would not do this without you. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep it shiny side up. Ray, miss you, love you, brother. And with that, y'all have a fantastic rest of your week. Go out there and do something cool. We'll catch you on the next one. Adios.